OST 2016. This is interviews, music reviews, and more. This is The Hodder Show.
What is up, everybody? We are rolling out of here today on episode 358 of The Hodder Show. I have been doing absolutely fantastic. Thank you so very much for tuning in and clicking that play button on today's episode of the podcast on what is surely to be a very entertaining episode. I'm sitting down with my old buddy, former producer of The Hodder Show, as well as voice actor extraordinaire, Mr. Brandon Bowden. And we have a near 2-hour long conversation, and we cover so much ground, ranging from kind of how he got started with the world of voiceover, making the plunge into doing it full time, his work on the podcast, as well as his work on Two Guys in the Game, some of his own ventures, and kind of the challenges that he's faced getting into the voiceover world, and also some fun projects that he has done. So we have a ton of fun on this episode, and I hope that you guys enjoy it. Before we jump in, I, of course, need to give a shout out to everyone who submitted questions for last week's episode of the show, the Ask Hodder Anything. Those are always a lot of fun. Thank you very much to everyone who submitted questions. Hope that you enjoyed the responses. We are ready to jump into today's episode, my chat with Brandon Bowden from Bowden Voice. But of course, quickly, we're going to hear a word from the sponsors who are helping the Hodder Show grow. Let's check it out. So it's been over 200 episodes since my guest today was officially on the Hodder Show in a solo capacity. Of course, he was involved in the 5th year anniversary special back in 2021, whenever the hell it was. I don't remember anymore. It feels like it was a while ago. But I realized the other day it had been so long since literally like 2017 was the last time he was on. So I figured it was high time. A lot's happened in your life ever since we've talked to you and that. And I'm so excited to dive in. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Mr. Brandon Bowden, one of my best friends in the whole world, of Bowden Voice, here today.
Howdy, howdy.
It's good to be sitting in the famous Boner Studios once again.
Famous Boner Studios.
The world famous Boner Studios, bro.
Was that Zach that gave that name to? Or was it you?
I don't remember. I think it was me.
It was a little bit of a brainchild because I know you were both here when that name came up.
Boner Studios. Bit rates and buttholes.
Bit rates and buttholes. That was the alternate name for the podcast.
Yes. And I think, because he called it Brandon Studios. He'd be like Mr. Bowden Studios. Because he was all, what did he always say? He was like, oh yeah, he always looked at you like you were like Mr. Stark. You were like Tony Stark.
I'm the Iron Man of the of whatever world it is we inhabit.
Yeah, you were like Iron Man. He was like, you're Captain America. You're like the first podcaster. He's like, and then like, I'm like Tom Holland, Spider-Man. Oh hey,
the younger one.
Man, hey, let me do a podcast. Stand down, kids. You're not ready. Oh hey, oh come on, Mr. Bowden. Let me. Oh,
and then eventually I'll sacrifice myself for the greater good. Sorry, spoilers.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler. Don't watch. If you haven't watched Endgame yet, it's spoilers.
Brandon's like, yeah, if I'm going to take this shit down.
Which includes me. I haven't seen Endgame either, so I've also spoiled it for myself.
I mean, you've never been a Marvel.
I've made it through part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm on Iron Man 2 presently.
When did that come out? Like 2017?
That's the second out of the whole thing right now.
So you've watched the first Iron Man.
Yeah.
And now the second.
Part of it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, part of it. Oh, okay.
I made it to like the part where Mickey Rourke was speaking Russian, and then I was like, nope. No.
I think Iron Man 2's it's probably the weakest one out of the three, I think.
Yeah, okay.
But then again, I'm the guy who cried during Iron Man 3, so it is what it is. I don't want to talk about it anyway. We're not here to talk about that because something pretty awesome that has happened since 2017. So when we spoke, you were starting to dive into the world of voiceover a little bit. You were kind of just starting to really dip your toes in. You were still working at the radio station full time as a producer.
Yep.
Doing some voiceover stuff there as well. And fast forward to 4 months ago.
August. So yeah, 3 months.
Oh, wow. You took the plunge to do voiceover stuff full time.
Yeah. Quit the radio stations and basically just been doing the same thing I've been doing before then, just kind of doing more of it now.
What was the kind of the catalyst for that? Like what helped with the decision for you to just go, you know what, let's just dive into this? Because I think that's something that a lot of people would like to be able to do when they're in a situation where they're passionate about something, to just make that jump in.
That is the hardest part, is actually just doing it, right? I was making enough money probably for a couple months even before then. Like I was doing the voiceover for about, say, like 5 hours a day, and then I'd be working 8 hours a day. And I found myself making just as much money working those 5 hours a day just doing voiceover as I was working at the radio station. So I'm like, oh, what's the point of doing both here? I'm just working. I'm kind of burning the candle at both ends, and I was always tired, and I wasn't happy with what I was doing at the radio stations anymore, and not because of anything to do with the radio stations. I think it was just time to move on. And I just I was talking to my therapist one day, and she's just like, "Well, if you're gonna do it, do it." You've been, and I had talked about doing it for like a year and a half, and I just, I'll probably quit my job one day and start voiceover, but I always gave myself dates.
Right.
So I said, "Oh, come June 1st, I'm gonna quit and start doing this voiceover." And then June came and passed, and I'll do it in July. July came and passed, and then it just was a matter of getting to the computer, getting on my email, and writing my letter of resignation to my boss. And it's I thought it was going to be more of a process, but it was mainly just kind of like jumping into a pool without dipping your foot in at all. It was kind of just head first, and it forces your hand. So that was the biggest challenge for me, was actually just doing it, because then you're committing to yourself, and you have to be accountable to yourself now, which is not an easy transition. There's some days where my motivation just isn't there. And it's like, I'm not going to be lazy and not do anything today. Well, that day I don't make any money. So you kind of, that weighs on your mind. And then when you do have a good day, you feel better about it. And it's kind of like you chase that feeling of like feeling accomplished and all that. So it's kind of like you have to push yourself. And I don't know for some people, but for me, it wasn't instantaneous. It's taking time. And it's only been 3 months, so it's still taking time. So, but, if anybody's out there listening, it's like, oh, I've kind of wanted to do this, and I'm kind of fed up with what I'm doing now for work. The hardest part is literally just doing it, like just kind of moving forward and taking that step.
Taking that plunge to be like,
if you're waiting for a sign, excuse me, if you're waiting for a sign, it's not going to come.
Right.
If you're waiting for that big payday, especially in voiceover work, if you're waiting for that big payday to like quit and all that, it's not how it works. You might find a big payday and all that, but it's not that. You can't let that be the catalyst, because you don't know when you're going to find another payday like that. You know what I mean? You kind of just have to go for it.
Well, and something I think is funny is I just found out, actually just a couple of days ago, one of my favorite podcasters, John Grills from SCP Archives and Creepy, he's been doing SCP Archives and Creepy for very successfully for at least the last 2 to 3 years. And I just found out the other day that middle of this year, he has now started doing it full time.
Oh, really?
And I'm like, he waited that long? Like, really? Mm-hmm. But it's like,
should you explain what SCP is for your listeners who might not know?
Yeah. So for those who don't know what SCP Archives is, and we're going to be talking about the SCP universe in a little bit here. SCP Archives and the SCP is basically, they're these like science fiction-y type of creepypastas, almost is probably the best way to explain it.
Yeah.
And they're very fun, but also creepy as fuck sometimes.
I think it's like it's the evolution of like myths and urban legends sort of thing. It's like the 21st century idea of it. Oh my God, my voice. This isn't good. No. It's like the 21st century version of like, urban legends and
right,
like the Loch Ness Monster sort of thing. It's like the evolution of that.
Yes. And they're very, very much based in a lot of the sci-fi world and stuff, but then also, excuse me, they're very much based in that creepypasta universe,
yeah,
where everyone can, be a part of it and stuff like that. But so SCP Archives, does full audio drama productions of those stories.
Yep.
And John Grills is the main narrator and host on that. But then also he's the main host on Creepy, which is reading creepypastas and also submitted stories and things of that nature, along with a huge cast of extremely talented people that I'd be here all night to list. But I thought that was funny myself, just because I was like, man, if I was making the amount of money I know they make, just because I look at how many patrons they have alone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, like I would quit my job tomorrow. Like, you know, but it's even when you're being,
you quit your job to do creepypastas and horror stuff like that? No way.
No. But like, even when you're getting success, I think making that plunge, especially like it's a little different, I guess, if I had kids or whatever, maybe I'd feel differently about it. But even when you're just looking out for yourself, like making that plunge is super scary.
Yeah.
Like,
and I mean, like I was in a position where I have the time and I have the financial situation.
Yeah, the stability to do it.
Yeah, because like, you know, I bought a house in 2018 and with my ex, it didn't work out. We got rid of the house, and like with the housing market being what it was, I didn't want to spend the money on another house. Because like now I'm going to be paying twice as much for what I had. Basically, I don't want to spend all that money for something that I basically just had for half the price, if that makes sense. And then even renting a place right now is ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like, screw this. I'm going to suck it up, be a 30-year-old man who lives with his parents for a few years. And I'm going to freaking take a shot at this thing while I have an opportunity and the circumstances are there for it. You know what I mean? The circumstances fit. So I'm like, okay, this is the best time I'm going to have, or the best opportunity I'm going to have. I'm not going to let it go to waste.
And to have that support system.
Yeah.
Where they're like, hell yeah, like let's do it, you know, like, and have the space to be able to build your booth and stuff. Like it's awesome to see, because I'm very jealous anytime I come over here and see your booth. I'm like, ugh. But let's go back, because as long as I've known you for the last
forever
15 years or so, whatever, you've always, and I thought about this the other day, we've always had a fascination with like recording silly videos and like recording audio in some capacity and stuff like that. Do you think that's where it started, or was it more?
So my fascination was originally in radio. I remember like I have really early childhood memories of hanging out with my dad, listening to Sportsnet 590 The Fan, and listening to a guy like Bob McCown on that station, where he was such an eccentric personality, and he was rough around the edges and all that, and he had just this aura about him on air, and I'm like, wow, like that guy, he's got something. And I'm like, I think I could do that. Because like I was, you know, I've always been kind of argumentative, and I've always liked sports. So I'm like, I'm gonna take that guy's job one day. You know, that was my whole attitude, and not in like a malicious way. But like
you weren't like, well, I'm better than you. It was just like, I want to do.
But I'm
that
like, this
one
guy's
day.
got to retire sooner or later.
Yeah, right.
But so actually, and then I ended up working with him for a short time when I was I was interning at Sportsnet for a couple months there after I was done college. But that was where it initially came from. And so it was always something I was interested in, recording and using my voice as a tool. But it developed more and more as the years went on. So it went from the sports radio thing to when I got to Durham College, they had a radio station there. So late into my first year there, I went in there and saw what it was all about. And they're like, well, we're not taking anybody on for the rest of this year, but come next year, come back and we'll figure something out. So I went in there and I did an hour-long sports talk show on Riot Radio, their like web station and stuff like that. I did that for 6 months, I think, where I'd come up with a whole bunch of stuff to talk about and all that. And it was a sports show where I played music. So it really was a mishmash of topics. So it's like, oh yeah, the Minnesota Vikings have done this week, and here's some Nirvana.
Anyway, here's Wonderwall.
So it's like it was a mixing of the genres, and like, but it also taught me that like, okay, I got to figure out a focus here, because at this point it's like, I had to pick one or the other.
Right.
So I had to figure out what I was going to do, and then I I was going for sports admin at Durham College at that point, and I really realized it was a business course just talking about sports stuff, which she was like, not my thing. I like sports, but I don't need to learn. I didn't want to be in a business management course.
You don't want
to.
Yeah, you don't want to learn the business. It's like people who love music but get into the music business.
Exactly.
Course.
It's like
it's not for everybody.
No, and it wasn't for me. So I dropped out. And originally, when I had applied for colleges before that, I had applied for radio in a couple places, and Loyalist College in Belleville got back to me like that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try and apply again because hopefully they'll just accept me that quickly. Thankfully enough, they did. And I went there for 2 years, and that's when I got hooked on production because of my production professor, Craig Jackman. He was a producer for Rogers for like 25 years. And he decided he wanted to teach and all that. And the guy's an award-winning producer. So like, and he basically gave me the foundation for everything I know about audio production, audio design, all that kind of stuff. And I realized, I'm like, holy crap, I can be more creative doing this kind of stuff than I was doing on-air kind of stuff. And I really relished that creativity, and I really wanted to, use that. So that's when I got into the production side of radio and the production side of broadcasting. And I got a job at Durham Radio after that, working for 94.9 The Rock, CKDO, KX96, and all their affiliate stations out. They got one in Hamilton. They got one in Vancouver now. They got one going in Grimsby, Ontario. They're everywhere now across the country. And I'm just trying to think where I was going with this. But like, and then it evolved again. I was doing production for 6 years, and it just wasn't fulfilling me anymore.
Right.
And then I kind of went back, and I remember when Robin Williams died, and that kind of was another turning point for me, because I was like, okay, so that's before I was at the radio stations, but he was always an influence of like, man, the stuff he did with his voice, whether it be Aladdin or even his like roles like Mrs. Doubtfire and stuff like that, the way he was such a character and all that, I'm like, I can do that stuff. I've been doing that stuff my whole life. Like in high school, I was doing impressions of cartoon characters back then,
You've always been that way. You've always been an extremely entertaining person, obviously, but also using your voice to be entertaining.
Yeah, and I love doing that kind of stuff. It kind of went back to that after once I was starting to get a little bored at the radio stations. I started kind of going back to that thought and being like, what if I tried voice acting and all that? And because again, at the radio stations, I was getting bored. I was looking for more stuff to do. And I'm like, oh, so they gave me some on-air shifts or some voice track shifts. I should say it wasn't live. I was just voice tracking like weekend shifts on the Rock and doing that kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, this is something different, but it's not quite
scratching
there
that
yet.
itch.
Yeah. And I'm like, I want to voice commercials. I want to like, let me voice some commercials and all that. And they're like, oh, well, we only approve certain voices to be on commercials and all that. I'm like, fine, I'll do it myself. So I decided I'm going to go get a nice, VO microphone, which ended up being my Shure SM7B, which is funny because I don't even use that for voiceover anymore. And then I was trying to find a way to do it in my home and trying to kind of scratch that creative itch there. And I had tried YouTube before that, and I think I've started and finished off like 3 different podcasts.
I was going to bring that up. You've always flirted with doing creative type stuff in that way. Like, I mean, way back in the day, you actually started a radio talk, sports talk show.
Yep.
Was it Around the Interruption or something of that nature?
Oh man,
Brandon Sharp as a Razor Bowden or something like that.
That was a long time ago.
that was high school.
Yeah.
I will never forget it because you had Fuel, but just the ending part as like the song, but like you had to like play it in person. And I will never forget. And like it was good, but I just remember I was like, man, how far stuff's come,
Oh my God, I just remember that now. Yeah.
I burn. Then you like had to click it and turn it off.
Oh my God.
I wonder if it's just funny to think how far stuff's come, right? But even back then,
the one thing I remember about that show is I remember saying like James Posey was one of the best NBA players to ever come along because he had won so many championships around that time. And now it's like, oh man, who remembers James Posey out of all those things? It's like, man, I was really like touching on some obscure stuff at that point. But
then from there you did,
totally
you did the YouTube stuff, obviously, Your Average Noob. You did that and streaming stuff.
Which Busenheimer still gives me crap about because I killed his dream.
Who? Anyway.
What? Yeah.
Who?
No, he's dead.
He's dead. Busenheimer's dead. Shouts to Craft Woody.
He goes by many names.
He goes by many names. The MC. But what's fun is then then from there, obviously, you flirted with some podcast stuff,
Yep. I tried making a podcast where I ripped into the Canadian radio industry.
Radio A, which was interesting.
Which ended up just being more just me like venting out my frustrations.
Yeah, and I think, but the thing is, you realize that, and you were like, okay, this is just me venting. This is not.
And I realized it was coming from like a negative place and all that. I like that kind of content, but it drains me.
Yeah, it's very doing negative. It's why I've never delved into the world of like true crime and stuff like that personally, because I'm like, it's draining.
And just to put it out there, it wasn't my specific job in radio I was angry about. It was the whole industry.
It was radio in general.
Yeah. Like my Durham Radio was a great company to work for, still is. I have no qualms with them, but like as the Canadian radio industry as a whole, I got some stuff to say about that. That was kind of my thing there, and it was kind of like. I'm like I could make a difference, but like I don't think I want to put that much work into like that negative kind of energy thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And then you did the AEW Express for a little
Express.
while. Well, actually, excuse me.
Could you imagine what I'd be saying if I was still doing that show now?
God,
I would have things to say.
You'd be Jim Cornette 2.0. We got damn fucking sense. We got damn motherfucker.
I would have been Jim Cornette talking about AEW before Jim Cornette started talking about AEW.
Jesus Christ.
Because like I loved it at first. There was something different about it and all that, but now it's just turned into like, what are you doing?
WCW 2.0.
It really is. It's like, brutal. And you hear, like, I'm not going to go into depth in wrestling right now because you might not stop me. But, and again, it was like, as the programming shifted and to something I was like a little less desirable to me, like I started that, I think.
It was put it this way, I was still at the Plaza. So it was at least 2018, 2019 when you started. It had to have been.
I think it was almost the pandemic era.
Was it 2020 when you started?
It might have been, yeah.
Really? Okay.
It might have been because I remember talking about like Billy Gunn being in the crowd.
Okay, so it was
so it was pandemic era. So I started at the worst possible time to talk about any sort of wrestling like that because the shows just had no crowds. There was no heat to it, and it's like there's not much to talk about. So I kind of I think that lasted 7 weeks, and then I was like, I'm good. I tried it and moved on to other things, and that's when really that's right about when I got laid off from the radio stations. And that's what really kind of propelled me to really put dip my foot into the voiceover world. And that's when I started really, putting demos together and applying for different positions for different voiceover projects and stuff like that. I was on Upwork. Every day I'd be looking at ads, I should say, looking for different kinds of work and a lot of YouTube narration and a lot of, I did a lot of work for very little money at the beginning because it was kind of like I needed to build a portfolio
or for free. When dealing with the podcast that you were producing. By the way, it was June 17th, 2020.
Okay, yeah. So right in the
I had to look it up. It was bothering me.
Of the pandemic. Yeah. So there's like nobody in the crowd. There's no crowd.
Yeah.
Like the crowd is basically like the lower end talent in AEW. So it was like, ugh. That was tough. I'm surprised I got through 7 weeks or 8 weeks, whatever.
That's
I did.
Brutal. It's just I just had to look it up because I was curious. But
I complimented Big Swole's wrestling, and at that point I'm like, oh, I didn't know what I was talking about.
Haha! Shouts to Big Swole.
Oh yeah, because she's doing lots of work now.
Yes.
Sorry.
Haha. But what's even funny is like, and then there's a minute in there that I'd be remiss not to bring it up. Is, obviously when I started off this podcast, I leaned so fucking heavily on you for the first 100 episodes and also Woody and mainly you two really and other cast of characters, but you a lot. And the reason for that was one, because I knew, okay, this is the best training I can have, but then also it's like, well, you're a creative guy who's entertaining and has fun ideas and is easy to talk to. I'm like, well, why wouldn't I? Yeah. But then obviously too, then you got involved with the production for a very long time and I learned a lot from you. You were involved with two guys in the game, obviously, as well.
That I think still is probably some of the most fun I've had producing anything.
Oh yeah, same here.
You two were I don't think you two understand how entertaining you were together.
I know now.
Yeah.
Honestly, I know now.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing.
I look back, I listen, like once a year, sometimes twice a year this year, I listen through the entire discography of Two Guys in a Game.
Yeah.
And I'm like, fuck, man.
Yeah.
You
guys were really, really, you guys had a really good dynamic.
I'd give anything now to be able to go back to that.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple things that I personally did, I would do differently.
Yep.
Couple things. But anyway, that's beside the point. We'll do a RIP Two Guys in a Game episode one day.
I want on that episode. Me, you, and Zach, just a triple round table.
Me,
a three-way dance, as they call it.
Yes. Me, you, and Casanova Jones in the same room again would be just fucking wild. And he says hello, by the way. I talked to him.
And we can trash Pokemon Scarlet and Violet together.
Hell yeah. I'm in. I'm in. But one thing that was interesting about Two Guys.
That's how long it's been since I've been on the podcast last. I think 3 generations of Pokemon have gone by.
At least three. At least 3.
There's Sun and Moon, Sword and Shield, and now we're on Scarlet and Violet.
I think Sun and Moon had... No.
Sun and Moon was like late 2017, so...
I think Sun and Moon had come out because we were talking about it on Two Guys in a Game.
Okay.
So I think it had just come out, but that was before you were on. But yeah, anyway. But what was interesting about that era of Two Guys in a Game too, that I think is fun, is I can see the evolution of your voiceover with Two Guys in a Game.
Mm-hmm.
Because 2017, you really started dipping your toes in pretty majorly.
Yeah, I tried to find little ways to give some personality to the podcast, extra personality to the podcast, right? And I thought, you know what? Like a lot of podcasts at that point, I didn't think we're using audio design enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what if I had like these little ways to like,
transition.
Yeah. Like what if, like these different segments of a podcast and all that. And like, I'm not saying it was the first podcast. It wasn't like revolutionizing it or anything like that. But
it was. Okay.
But I thought it just made the show fun. It just gave it a whole different life. And especially with you two, the way you guys saw video games and all that, especially like one of my favorite ones was you guys just pummeling Fallout 76. Oh, so good.
Which I finally played.
Oh boy.
But that's another story for another time.
But like that was, and I'm like, oh man, like, and that was, I'm like, I got to put extra stuff in this. Like I got to like kind of, and it's kind of, I think that was the beginning of where like these audio dramas come from and stuff like that, where it's very heavily depends on that sound design. Where
that sound design,
this was more of like an accent to it at that point. Two Guys in a Game was accented by some of the audio design instead of being built upon it.
Mm-hmm. Even little things like the gaming news segment, and which was always the shits, but thing
that was the
great.
best part. It was a gimmick.
Because they were terrible.
And you know what? The more I think back, we should have leaned into it more. Like we should have found the stupidest, most nonsensical, like consequenceless video gaming news and used that as the headlines. And because you look at it now, there's actually like people on YouTube who do video game news every freaking day.
Wild. It's wild to me.
Like I'm subscribed to a channel called Spawnwave every morning. The guy's 8:00. He's got video game news up. He does like legit gaming news, but like the fact, like I'm like, oh, we should have leaned into doing stupid gaming news more. Like, oh, Atari's looking to make a Dig Dug 3. Oh, look.
It's like, what?
Stupid shit. Like, we should have just started making up our own
Fortnite
news.
has a new skin.
We should have started making up our own news. Like, it should have been like almost like a Saturday Night Live, like, weekend update of video gaming news. That's what it probably should have been.
The amount of fun we could have had improv gaming news would have been ridiculous.
Like the way Colin Yost and Michael Shea on Saturday Night Live, they'll write each other's news headlines sometimes, so they like really make each other like squirm. I'm like, oh, Kaz and TJ should have been doing that from the start.
It would have been fun, but then also
like Kaz writes an article for you being like, oh, the Nintendo Switch is getting a remaster of Aiden Chronicles. What? Oh my god! Shut up, TJ. It's not real.
I got all excited. It's like, no, leave him alone. Leave Aiden Chronicles alone.
But like that would have been freaking prime. And it's just one of those things where like maybe we get revisit it one day.
Put it this way, I can assure you that the want is there from all parties involved. It's just when we can. Yeah. Maybe not specifically Two Guys in a Game.
And I think I think you've realized that's the biggest challenge with podcasting is the time and scheduling.
If I had unlimited time, I don't know if we'd bring Two Guys in a Game back, but we'd be doing something. And it'd be very the essence of two guys in a game would be with this.
Yeah.
We already have a name and the concept. It's just a matter of doing
Honestly,
it.
I have picked up on watching a new podcast. Well, not a new podcast. It's been around for like over 10 years, but I've told you about it. OSW.
Yeah.
Oh man, that show, that's a revolutionary podcast.
It
Because you know
is.
what? It's so tediously built. You know, it's a wrestling podcast, but everything's cut to video that's pertinent to what they're talking about. So they're talking about whatever pay-per-view they're talking about. And it's like, oh, there was this moment where this guy did that. They're actually cutting the video of that happening and like chronicling that moment and all that while you're watching it. And I'm like, oh man, that's what Two Guys in a Game was missing. The game footage. Like
Which would
imagine
be fun.
if we had cut those podcasts to video
Oh my God.
that accompanied it. And like whenever you guys were talking about something, you could actually, you know, cut the video to it and actually see it and all that, have a visual representation of what you're talking about. I think that would have been like wildfire, because I don't think there's anything out there at that point. There was very little out there like it. And there might be stuff like that now, but you two together were so unique that I think it would have been just off the charts.
Yeah. Well, then what was fun too was there was stuff we did that like in pertains to you, like doing the segments, you know, Hotter's cheap game challenge.
Yeah.
We did that awesome thing and I used it once because but then a much better segment came along.
The sexy corrections.
Well, that too.
Oh.
Oh, dude, you have no idea. Like I was at work the other night because I just finished listening through it like pretty
Yeah.
recently. And I don't remember what episode it was, but there was two. Oh, it was the Mario Karting through the ages and then whatever the other one was. But they were reversed.
Yeah.
Like you had done, I said, oh, episode 37. And then it was like, bum, 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 bum. And now a sex. And you were like, it's supposed to be episode 36, but you reversed it yourself.
Yeah.
Like, and I was like, dude, no,
I was right
I
the
sent the
first
other one to
time.
you the first time. And you were like, I remember like you felt so bad, but I thought it was so fucking funny because you were just like, because they started off like, what Cosmo Jones means is blah, blah, blah. I don't remember what the first one you did was. There's something to do with Pokemon.
There was-
Pseudo Legendary or Pseudo Legendary or whatever.
Pseudo legendaries and legendaries.
You were like,
yeah.
and Cosmo Jones, of course, is meaning Pseudo Legendary or whatever.
And like that came from the idea, like, okay, Pokemon's just one of those topics that people get really obsessive over, and they'll make a correction on that if they hear
Yeah.
it. So I'm like, what if like, and I had the idea, like, what if there was a segment that not only corrected it, but was kind of like the Old Spice guy in front of a fireplace correcting it? Like with a bottle, with like a glass of wine being like, well, yeah, actually what he meant to say was,
What he
like,
meant to say
I'm like,
was
that would just be
this.
funny.
Yeah.
Like it's, and so I'm like, okay, I'll call it a sexy correction.
And
So
they
it's
were
not just
great. And there was the one where we were like, oh, good job, Brandon. You ruined the whole podcast. Bump, 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 bump. And then you were just like, do you think anyone wants to hear your bitch ass is unprocessed? I don't think so. And I remember Zach saying one time, he was like, I don't even know why I bother. It's just like he's the higher power and there's nothing I can do. And then it was like, bum, 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 bum. And now it's sexy. And you were just like, yeah, bitch. And then like, I can't remember what
Yes.
you said, but you just came. But then as they went on, it almost got more like,
it became more of an inside joke to the
Yeah.
show.
you were just kind of like, he meant that.
It almost became like a segment of the show. Like you and Zach had to make some
Yeah.
sort of like mistake on purpose just to
Oh,
get
dude,
that
we did it
segment.
all. I did it all. The amount of times I would have him explain just shit I already knew about to me just to use the teaching TJ pop culture was fucking weird. Like I was like he said something about like over 3,000. And I was like, oh, what's that? Because I knew it would make a really good segment.
Yeah.
And he was like, you don't even know what that is? Then it's like, oh, like Hitchhiker's Guide to the
I
Galaxy.
think, I think
Like-
at one point you even said, no, I just wanted to hear the stinger.
Yeah, I said it all the time.
Yeah.
I just wanted to hear that.
Yeah.
Then it was like,
But then there were some times where like you were actually like, you didn't know what the hell he was talking
oh
about.
yeah.
And like, it was, I think those ones were even funnier because it's like, you know,
How do you not know this?
not only that, but like somebody's thinking to themselves, how does he not know this? And literally something comes on where it kind of exacerbates the fact that you don't know it. It's kind of like,
Teaching TJ. I think that was one of the ones you put the most work into at first too, right? Didn't you
yeah,
say
because
you
I
had
actually
like
sang it.
yeah? Didn't you say you had like 8 voice tracks or something?
Yeah, there was like 8 layered voices and
Awesome.
like I found like a little royalty for free piece of music that I could like
Teaching TJ about pop culture.
and I like cut it up to make sure the drum beats matched like my singing and all
That's so
that. It was-
awesome.
Yeah.
But then one thing that was probably like one thing with Two Guys in a Game that was so great was the skits and stuff we did in the intros, right? But there was one where Zach was singing randomly. He was like, "If you only know."
Yeah.
And it was one of my favorite things he ever did because it encapsulated him as a human being so well. And you found this music and you put it under it. And it was like, in parts, it was like really well put together. And then there were parts where it was like, it was so out of time because you couldn't, right?
No. Yeah.
And I was just sitting there like, but I think my favorite thing from a production standpoint is, and also when I noticed like, wow, he's really, really leveled up his voiceover and production for voiceover, was the indie game of the month.
Oh, like that whole Game of Thrones idea I had for it. Like,
when AAA game developers make crappy games, he will be here. This is Cazador Jones, indie video game of the month. I pretty much did it perfectly in inflection by the way, because I've listened
exactly what
because I've listened to it so much. It's just, I would listen to that on its own just because I was like, it was so fun.
Yeah, and like it was just like, and I love doing that. The wackier, the better. At that point, when I was like listening to him, like I just want to make this show wacky.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? Thinking about like all that stuff, like now it's like, oh man, we should have cut it to video because I could have come up with like different video aspects of it. Like thinking now, like in hindsight,
of course,
like, I could have had like scenes from Game of Thrones playing and cut them together while like and like different guys from Game of Thrones getting killed, and like putting like AAA like game developer logos on them and just like showing their head get cut off and like
it's just Zach's face on it.
Like Jon Snow is just with Kaz's face on him. He will be there.
My God. But what's fun, like, is right around that time, near the time when you respectfully bowed out from doing the production stuff because you wanted to focus on the voiceover stuff really more, and the production stuff for the radio more. Right around just before that time is really when I was like, holy fuck, like this is real. Like you're really, I think around that time is when you started doing the YouTube stuff.
Yeah.
Like for voicing different videos and stuff.
Yeah.
Because to me, when I really noticed, because it's hard when you're friends with somebody, like you don't really see.
No, because you talk to them all the time. You know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, you don't even realize the transition until it's made, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think for me, what really put it over the edge was when you got the role for Detective Void.
Yeah.
Which, for those of you who are listening who don't know what Detective Void is, it is a fantastic YouTube channel that does the SCP content I was talking about earlier. And it's basically a detective who is bringing these investigations he's doing into these anomalies and entities and SCP archives, the SCP content and stuff like that. Phenomenal content. It's all video with the cartoon tune
they got some
type stuff.
Animators.
Very, very well done. And you've been the voice of that channel from day one, which is wild because, dude, the amount of times that, because I'm in that universe on my Discord. I have a bunch of people who are into that kind of content.
Yeah.
And I will never forget when I can't remember who it was, but they randomly in the chat was like, "Oh man, did you guys see the latest Detective Void episode? And they're talking about it, and I'm just sitting there like, and they were like, "Oh, do you like Detective Void?" And I was like, "Yeah, you could say that." And they were like, "Oh, like, and I was like, I wanted to. I think I ended up just saying, "Oh, well, like, you guys know Brandon," in the chat, Bowden voice. Like, yeah. I'm like, well, Brandon's literally the voice of Detective Void.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, he's not. So I think at that point they had heard, like, you had been on a couple chats.
Yeah.
And then I was like, no, like, he is literally the voice of Detective Void. He's been the voice since day one. And they were like, I remember like they were freaking the fuck out. And I was like,
now, to be fair, his voice has gone through a couple of iterations.
Yes, it has.
So.
It has. But I want to go back to that because how did you even book that role? Was it literally just you were on Upwork? And
I was on Upwork. I booked that off Upwork, and I didn't know what I was getting into.
That's the understatement of the century.
SCP. I'm like, what is this? Some produce like commercial? Like, what it was. And they told me what it was, and they told me what they needed. I'm like, okay, so this guy's like a kind of a zany detective and all that. And then I started to realize, okay, so this is something that's already kind of has a community on YouTube and stuff like that. Like it's got, there's people who do audio shows of it, videos and stuff like that. But I realized that what they were trying to do was present them in a different way. They were trying to present them as, instead of just explaining what these different entities are, they want somebody who's in the middle of it investigating it, and the audience can't make heads or tails of what the hell he is.
Yeah.
Is he an SCP? Is he not an SCP?
That's the funnest part about that community is Detective Void and SCP.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I'm not. Wink. Like,
and so at first they wanted a deep voice, and I'd given them this like, oh man, I don't even know what the first voice. The first voice was out there. Like,
wasn't the first voice like ending in the side? It was very like
it was really it was out there.
It was zany.
Yeah. And they're like, okay, we want more of a straight voice, and I'm like, okay. So I'm like, what if I gave him like a very intense voice, but I kind of deepen it a little bit to kind of give it a like, because he's if you've never seen, he's wearing a mask all the time.
Yes.
So I'm like, is the mask? And I would, this was something I didn't get a lot of feedback on. But I'm like, does the mask affect his voice? Like if it's affecting his voice, I should probably be disguising my voice a little bit to kind of go along with that. And as we've gone through, I've been doing this for 2.5 years now. As we've gone through, they've asked for adjustments to the voice and all that. They wanted a more natural read and all that. So moving forward, you're going to hear more of my natural speaking voice with him and all that. But I'm still trying to keep that mystique to him. And now it's more, instead of putting on putting on the Detective Void voice, it's more just slowing it down and kind of being more cerebral with it and kind of really trying to hit those dramatic points and like trying to capitalize on the uniqueness of each of these objects and what makes them freaky or what makes them funny or whatever. Because it's not. When I first started, I just assumed it was all creepypasta stuff. But there's some funny
it's
stuff.
Not. Yeah, there's some fun ones too.
And I've noticed that like this guy's got a personality. Void's got a hell of a personality on him.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's just kind of learning. It's a long process. I didn't realize how long it took to really develop a voice and all that. And it really gave me more respect for people who do like animated series, like a guy like Seth MacFarlane, how he developed like just the voice of Peter on Family Guy.
Mm-hmm.
You go and listen to the first episodes. The voice is like radically different from what we know as Peter Griffin now. Like it's almost more I don't know if it's more Boston or more Rhode Island sort of. He had a really heavy accent on Peter. And it was almost like a different voice. But it's just, he was refining it over time. And I don't think he, I don't think he found that the exact tone he wanted for him until maybe about season 2 or season 3.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, that's like a lot of work he put into it. And like, even these, cartoons that are worldwide, globally known, still the characters need refining over time. And I think that when people say, oh, the voice of Void has changed and all that, I'm like, yeah, my delivery's changed, but I'm just figuring out. Now, I'm not saying it's the same quality or whatever as like a Family Guy or something like that, but because it's one of the first characters I ever got, it's taken me a little longer to settle into his character and learn about it and all that. Because that's one of the biggest things when you're doing voice acting is you have to understand not only what you're doing when you're voicing, but who you're voicing and what they would do in certain situations. And I still learn about what Void would be doing all the time. I'm still learning new things about him. Like, he's obviously curious. He's kind of mischievous. But he's also clever. And that's one thing that, like, I really try to get is he's a clever dude and he's always kind of one step ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I find different characters in TV that I like, that I kind of, this person has those qualities. How can I incorporate some of those into Void? Like, I've been watching a lot of House lately on Amazon Prime. And
okay, so on Amazon Prime. I don't
just
know
in case anybody wants
I've been
to
watching House on Amazon Prime.
I know, just in case anybody wants to watch it. It's not on Netflix. But House is a character that has a lot of those qualities. And just the way he speaks, it's like, okay, I can kind of incorporate that into how Void is.
That's interesting. Okay.
And you have to take it from everywhere. So, and one of the first things I learned when I first got talking to my voiceover coach was, they said, play video games, watch TV, watch cartoons. And
you're like, check.
Like, how much an hour will I get for doing that?
Yeah, really.
But and it's like, oh, I get why now, because you can take little things. So if you already know something about your character, you can take like a personality trait from here, and you can mix it together and make your own unique sort of character that way. And so still to this day, Void's developing in my brain all the time. I think about Void once a day at least, and what he's thinking and how he thinks and how he speaks and all that. And it's just more and more refined. It's kind of like whittling. You whittle like a wooden statue and all that, and you can take little bits off just until you get it right perfect and all that. And that can take a long time. But after, like, if you put enough effort into it, people will really gravitate towards it because they feel like it's it becomes real to them because it's real to you.
Right. And one thing that's just so fun is when I kind of rediscover Detective Void, and this is what's so fun for me, is I kind of forgot about Detective Void, that you were doing it, because I wasn't super into the content when you first started it.
Yeah.
And then I got super into SCP. And I remember I found Detective Void at a recommendation from somebody. And I was like, Detective Void. It's like, well, this was like maybe like a year after, I think. I was like, Detective Void. That's not familiar. And then I pop in on the first episode that popped up. And right away, I'm like, that's fucking Brandon. And I was like, what the I remember I was so like, I think I either texted you or
Garrett
called
had
you.
that moment too, didn't he? Because it would.
Yeah. I was with Garrett, and he was like, I played it, and he was like, that's fucking Brandon. And I was like, yeah, like, he didn't, because you're also not someone like, you don't like talk about it a lot, just because like you'll talk about it if you're asked, but you're not like, oh yeah, this, because you're very just kind of modest. That's how you are, right?
Yeah,
you're
and like with voiceover, you never, like, especially when I first got into it, I'm like, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about any of this, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh my, but I'm like, okay, I haven't signed a contract or an NDA or anything like that, and I'm not giving away plot lines to the story, right? So it's like, okay, and then I asked them, oh, can I use some of the work you guys have done on my demo reel? Because, I can just rip some video from that and kind of use it on a demo reel. And once they said yes to that, I'm like, okay, they're obviously okay with the fact that I'm putting it out there. That
it's not like it's a secret. It's not like it's and I think you should.
Yeah,
because at
and
this
like
point,
I have had clients in the past that I've had one just recently that wants me to be a ghost voice.
Ooh,
not that kind of ghost voice.
No.
But like he's like, I can't let you advertise what you're voicing on your like demo reels and all that. I'm like, cool. As long as you're giving me that, telling me that beforehand. No problem.
All good, yeah.
Yeah. And that would just be me just talking normally anyway. So it's not like I'm developing a character for it and anything like that. So it's like, okay, yeah, not a big deal. And so it's like, if you tell me that from the beginning, then yeah, I won't mention anything like that. But since I was like, okay, like they obviously have no problem with me saying I'm the voice of him and all that. So it's, and at least people can say like, it's not just been a bunch of people, random people voicing Void. I am Void.
Right. You are. And what's so fun is, for me anyway, I think it was the Q&A episode that they did, where I'm watching this and I'm like, this is literally you as a person.
Yeah.
And like, obviously they don't know you really. Like, yeah, you've been working together for 2 years, but it's like it's a business relationship, right? Yep. But I'm like, I remember watching this and I'm like, this is literally how you would freaking answer these questions. Like, and I'm like, to me, if anything was to change on that end, no.
Yeah.
You are Detective Void. You are that voice.
Yeah.
And it's so fun for me being a genuine fan of the content, and then it's like, I was like, oh yeah, like this is...
And like, it's kind of neat because like now they've expanded into doing different types of content too. And I didn't realize at first when I started doing it, the Detective Void, they do it in like, it's dubbed into multiple languages.
Yeah. So I think originally it's Russian, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
I think, yeah, it's somewhere from like Eastern Europe or something like that. I don't know where it originated, but yeah, like, and I'm like, cool. Like that's, and people might think, oh, it's a little watered down, diluted because of that. But I'm like, no, like it's still like, you can tell from the subscriber count, they appeal to people.
They do all right.
Yeah. So, I just, if people listen and say, oh, this is the guy, I do put a lot of thought and work into his voice and how he says things and how he thinks about things. Like I do put a lot of thought into that. And I think the one disadvantage I do have is it's one of the first jobs I ended up landing. It was one of the first jobs I booked. So I was kind of learning on the fly for a little while there. And I still am. I don't think I'll ever stop learning when it comes to voiceover. It's just one of those things that like every project's different. Every project needs a different skill set, and you have to you're always learning on the fly, and Yeah, I was gonna say something else there, but I can't remember it.
Well, then what's so fun too is like, so from Detective Void, you started booking a lot of different stuff. And I mean, you do like different like YouTube narration-y type stuff.
Yeah, a lot of like
you know,
general narration where it's just me talking.
Yeah. When you started kind of getting into the doing the voiceover stuff more on a even part-time basis, what was it you were doing? Like, did you just kind of start going on like Fiverr and Upwork and stuff like that and finding jobs that way?
Upwork was probably my main source of income for a while. I think I've cleared like over $23,000 on Upwork since 2020, which, you know, it's fine. Voices, I picked up a couple jobs off of voices.com, which is like a pay-to-play website where you pay like $500 a year and you have access to their auditions, all that. And I booked a couple things through there. It's been a while since I booked anything through there because I've had enough work to where I don't need to audition lately. But you never know with that when it comes to work like that, jobs can leave you as quickly as they come to you. So I have that on the back burner as if I ever need to like, you know, network for some new jobs and stuff like that. But a lot of it came from Upwork, just kind of applying for things that I found interesting, right? So like I've done a couple basketball videos for one basketball channel because I like sports. And when you know about the topic, it's even easier because it's not like, oh, I have to look up how this is pronounced because I have no idea what it is. You know, when it comes to basketball, I know the guys' names because I watch basketball, or I'm just familiar with the sports world in that way. So it kind of came naturally. So I'm like, okay, I'll apply for that because it's something I could probably do pretty easily. But my bread and butter has really become my character stuff.
Yeah.
That's the stuff I really enjoy doing most of all, is like putting on different voices. Cause like I said, from the beginning, that's what kind of attracted me to it, was the fact that I know I can do that with my voice. I can bend and twist my voice into different ways. And I've figured out like little tricks to give these different characters these different deliveries, inflections, and attitudes. And like I was telling you before we recorded, I picked up a character that literally just spasms into turning into a chicken sometimes, and I'm like, that's so much fun. He stutters and he turns into a chicken sometimes. It's so much fun.
That sounds like such a great.
He's got stutter, and you know. I'm like,
oh my god.
What other job can you do where you just fool around like that and make money?
I think one of my favorite things that you've shown me that you did, and it was a big project, but it was just so fun. It was like the dinosaur thing or whatever.
Yeah, I do. It's like a cartoon made by the toy company Zuru, and it's just these. It's like they make a cartoon based on their toys, or vice versa. I'm not sure, but it's a really neat marketing tool to get like the look of your toys in front of kids. You know, kids like cartoons and all that, and they always have like a live stream going of like past episodes. So you know, it's something like I could see a parent turning on for their kids just to entertain their kids for a bit. Right.
And it's really fun and silly.
Yeah. And I get to channel my inner kid and get to be like, this is what I would have found funny when I was like that age. So like, I'm just going to do that.
Was it the pirate? There's
there's a lot of I do every character on those.
I was going to say, you do all the characters for it.
Yeah.
So which is again, is so fun because I'm just like, oh, like this is literally, it just encapsulates you so well too. Right.
Yeah. And like, it's funny because I read everything in order. So I'll read a script in order. Some people will read all of the
really, so you do
lines.
it. Okay.
So I'm literally always switching gears. It's like I'm having a conversation with myself in multiple voices. It's almost like schizophrenia in real life. It's like I'm hearing voices. I'm also making them.
I'm hearing voices. I'm also giving them life.
But that's been like the most fun, most rewarding kind of jobs for me, is those character-driven ones where I get to not only have fun, but be creative again. And that's the biggest thing, is being creative and like, okay, like when you're doing stuff like that, they'll give you references, being like, okay, we want it to have this kind of accent. Like Boston accent is a really popular one I always get. You know, pack the car. Like I always get like, oh, we need to have a Boston accent or a New York accent. It's like, okay, I can do those too. Yeah, like it's just so much fun to not only kind of capture those things, but also learn about them, sort of thing, while you're going through it, and be like, oh, okay, this one's got like, he's a little more fearful, he's a little more nervous. So what traits can I take that a nervous character might have? Whether it be stuttering or whether it be a higher voice when he's a little nervous or, stuff like that. It's just
some voice breaks.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Like voice cracks, stuff like that. Like,
Yeah.
and some of the characters I do are full voice cracks. Just, oh my God. It's just, and it's just using those little tricks and really having fun with it. And that's the biggest thing. I think everybody wants to get into voiceover because they think it's fun. Then they realize the work that goes into it. It's like, oh man, this isn't as fun. Well, you take the good with the bad that way. And
it can be fun, but also at the same time, it's a
lot of work.
It's a job. Yeah, you got to put the work in.
Yeah, and editing's that is what the editing is.
The editing is. Would you say that's kind of has been the hardest part for you, is putting the time into the editing, or is that something because of your background that you were like kind of used to already?
Yeah, like I'm very used to editing. I'm a pretty quick editor, but sometimes it's editing myself is almost a chore sometimes because I hear the same voice every day.
Right.
And you start to get really hypercritical. And I can listen to most people's voices and be indifferent to any flaws I hear because I don't hear them all the time, but I can hear every little freaking flaw in my voice all the time. Like even when I'm speaking now, I'm hearing all of them, whether I'm buzzing on my F's or my S's are too SC or stuff like that. I'm picking up on all of it, but you kind of have to remove yourself from that and be like, yeah, I don't have a perfect voice. Very few people do. It's a matter of refining it and accepting it. A little mixture of both. So, so if you want to get into voiceover, it's like you have to get over yourself that way.
Mm-hmm. What would you say has been, aside from, Detective Void and the whatever the I already forget the name of the dinosaur thing. Smashers. Are there other projects that you've done that you can talk about, obviously, that were just like you really, really enjoyed?
I really enjoy being directed, which is something you don't get a lot of when you're a new voiceover artist, I find. And if anybody's out there doing a project where they're hiring voiceover people, I don't know if it's a fear, but don't be afraid to like critique their work. Because that was the one thing I wish I would get more of, is more critiquing, because it would give me more of an objective view of like things I could improve on. So like I did one YTV show, with just a bit part where I played it's called the Keto Arcade Warriors. It's like I got an IMDb credit for it. So
Ooh.
I am real time.
Whoa, really? Holy shit. I got to look this up.
Yeah. I play a character named Axel, who's a Viking.
Ooh.
So, and there was just bit parts like that. It was just like a couple lines here and there. It was like mostly like, what I can compare it to is it's kind of like Pokemon in a way, where they send out these different warriors basically, and they have them fight each other. And I was just one of the guys who fights. And so it's a bunch of catchphrases and stuff like that. And like he's yelling as he's fighting and he's taking hits and stuff like that. But the one thing that's been different about that is I get real-time feedback.
Yeah. Because
they want to be on the other end listening to me voicing it while I voiced it. So I'm saying, like, screaming out this like catchphrases like, oh, come to Valhalla, and he hits people with his axe or whatever. And they'd be listening to me, okay, do it this way or do it that way. And it's a big help, because you don't really know what you're doing in real time like that sometimes. Sometimes you're voicing it and you come out, you can voice things sometimes and you'll think, oh my God, that's so good. And then you get out of the booth and you listen to it on tape. How old am I? You listen to it you listen to it on the recording and be like, what the hell is that? That sucks. So to have that reassurance that what you're doing is within the boundaries of what the creator wants is a really rewarding thing, because at that point you're not as hypercritical on yourself. You're like, okay, this is what they like. This is what, it's kind of like you learn what sells for your brand, and you can kind of use that moving forward to sell to other people, being like, okay, this person like that, and they produce these shows all the time, so I need to capitalize more on this. And so like that was a big one that I got, like for me, that was a bigger role that I got, that was kind of like holy crap, like it was the first time I had seen my name in a credits.
I'm literally looking at it right now, and it's just making me smile, because it's just awesome, like, to see your IMDb. Hang on, I gotta read this shit. Hang on. Where is it?
I did not make
there
my
we
own
go.
IMDb, I swear.
No, bro, you're a better man than me. Because if I was you, I'd be on that shit. I'd have my picture updated. I'd have a bio. I'm the worst. Brandon Bowden is known for Aikido Ultimate Arcade Warriors 2021, 2 episodes
There we go.
for the role of Axel.
Yep. And like I spent maybe 10 or 15 minutes with the producers just getting the right, things, getting the right lines down and getting the right inflections and the right, volume and stuff like that. And again, it was just really rewarding to work with the director. And I think that's another thing that, like, I think some voice actors, or especially new ones, might get a little nervous about. It's like, oh, somebody's listening to me do it. No, you want that. You want that direction. It's such a helpful thing to have because, again, it takes you out of your subjective state of mind listening to your own voice and puts you to more an objective state of mind being like, this is what they liked. You can't tell them what they like and what they don't like. It doesn't work that way. You accept that's what they like and you kind of try and capitalize it moving forward.
I had my first small experience with something like that where I was directing somebody with how they were recording a part. And I remember it was so intimidating, but they requested it. They were like, I need you to do this because, like, I am not comfortable just recording this and sending it to you because I want to make sure it's what you want. It's your character. You're the one doing this. I want to make sure it's what you want.
Yeah.
And I was just like, holy shit, this is intimidating. But then you do it and it's like, oh, and just like, oh my God, that was so helpful. Like,
and you were probably happy with the end product as well.
It was perfect because it was to a T exactly what I pictured in my head.
And,
so it's fun.
And there's probably an aspect or two that you might not have got if you weren't there. Something could have been, and it's not even like it's bad. It's just not what you're looking for.
It's that was good. Try this.
Yes. Like I like that, but this is what I had in mind.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can get exactly what you want. And worst case scenario, maybe they were right. Maybe the person on the other end was right with the way they did it, but now you have both options. So you can hear both of them and you can kind of put both into place and say like, okay, they were right. And you swallow your pride and you change, make the change. Right.
The amount of times that you know me, I'm not someone who likes to let go of things a lot.
Yeah.
You are one of the only human beings in the world I trust to put my podcast together ever. Yeah. Like if for some reason I ever couldn't and I was desperate.
Yeah.
I'd be like, dude, like, you are one of the literally only human beings I would trust to do it. But recently I had a situation where we did that Halloween special, myself and Baseline Feed did that crossover. And that was the first time basically since you did my production that someone else produced an episode that was on my podcast. And that was wild because that was a very humbling experience because there were some things that Tanner's fucking incredible sound designer.
Yep.
And I was listening and I'm like, I wouldn't have done that.
Yep.
Interesting. Okay. Like not in a bad way, but like, I was like, oh, I didn't hear that.
Yep.
Oh, I wouldn't have picked that song for this, but it works better.
Yeah. And
it's like, and I also shout out to Sam Peters for that too.
Sometimes it's healthy to take a step back.
Right.
And let somebody else take a look at it, see what they think. And like I said, it gives you an objective mindset now as opposed to being hypercritical and subjective because you could have made any choice.
Right.
Right. And you're always going to second guess your own choices sometimes. It's just the way we are as humans, I find. Like even when I'm voicing stuff still, like I always tell my clients, okay, especially I'm not being directed and I'm kind of doing it on my own. If there's any issues, I don't care if it's the way I said something and all that, tell me and I'll do it again. And if you want to give me extra direction, do that and I'll do it again. Like I want to make sure you have what you need, and not even that, what you want.
Yeah.
I think there's a big difference from what, from a production standpoint, especially if like a cartoon or something like that, there could be a wide girth or wide dearth.
Either a wide girthy.
I think dearth is the word I'm looking for. I used the word propensity at his wedding, so. But there can be a wide gap between what somebody needs and what they want. What you need is like, oh, I just need a voice to fill in here. Well, is that what you want though? Just any voice to fill in there? Is that
really what you want? Yeah.
Or do you want this or do you want that sort of thing? But yeah, I think it's like I said, it's healthy to sometimes step back from your own creation and let somebody else tell you what they think. And even like you said, it was hard for you to have somebody else do that, but it also gave you different ideas and it gave you a different perspective on what the show could sound like.
It also wouldn't have happened without that too, by the way. Let me just throw that out there.
Yeah.
Timing wise. And they absolutely killed it over at Baseline Feed. But
like even when I produced your show, there
Mm-hmm.
was aspects I put into it that you hadn't put into it before.
mainly because I didn't know how to, but yes.
Yeah,
and stuff I wouldn't have thought of.
Exactly. But the thing is, you take that moving forward and now it's part of your arsenal. It's part of your repertoire. It's something, okay, I have this idea in my head that we used to do before. You could take it and completely turn it on its head and make it something else, but just have that little inspiration in the back of your head being like, this was different. I wanted to do something like that again. Because I remember the one thing I did previews.
I was just about to bring that up. One of my favorite things that you did randomly one day, I think you asked me and you were like, what do you think of this? And I was like, fuck yeah. Where you literally just did like, if you missed last week's Hotter show, here's what you missed.
Yeah.
And it was like, I was like, oh, I didn't see that coming, but it was awesome. And it let you have your personality in it a bit too, because you did like almost like a little sketch for some of them.
Yeah. And I think it started with me just choosing a random clip that I found funny. Cause what I would do is like, that was the one thing that was so time consuming about producing a podcast was I had a hard time just taking the audio and processing it. I had to listen all the way through in real time. Is there anything I can do to give this more personality? And that was one of the things I listened to the whole thing because you never know when something's going to come up.
Right. You
can't just skim through a podcast like yours and just assume that it's fine being uniform every episode. I'm like, and that's the way you find different things that work, is trying something different with, every time something different comes up, kind of trying to capitalize on it. And maybe it's something moving forward as well. And that was the one thing, like, I think I had just really dug something that was on the week prior's podcast. And I'm like, why not turn this into like not only like a little trailer for the previous episode. So maybe like somebody who's listening to this one, who maybe just found it now, has a incentive to go back and listen to the previous one now. So it's kind of like marketing yourself at the same time, as well as, having somebody listen and maybe like they listen, go back, and maybe they go back all the way now. So it's kind of like sparking that flame under the listener's ear to be like, if you like the show, there's a backlog.
Which is something that I always push because I've got 357.
You should be doing that.
Backlogs.
You should be doing those like clip shows now. Like if you ever need to take a month off or something like that, you just don't want to record for a month, take some time off. You could like put together like 4 freaking like 3-hour clip shows of just you talking about different stuff. I could, and it'd be so much work. But it'd also be a lot of fun to do that. Yeah. Because you could go back and like find different stuff that you did that you really liked. Like, and I know one of the first episodes you'd probably reference and probably would put bits in from is that Lane Staley episode. Because if you do, you're going to get like huge views on it. Yeah, but never as good as the original. Nope. For whatever freaking reason. Well, that's why you're not remaking it. You're just repurposing it. Well, I literally added a new intro onto it because that's how it's like, hey guys, so this is a really old episode. Yeah. Because I'd have people who would comment and be like, oh man, like. Because you've done the rewinds where you basically just market a old episode and like. Because you know what? You have the content to do that. Yeah. Not a lot of people can say that. Like the big thing in TV. To get syndication on TV, you need at least 100 episodes. Yeah. You have 3 times that. Yeah. So if you were a TV show, you're up there with like, with the Seinfelds and the Friends of the world, where that could be just on reruns all the time because there's so many episodes that like by the time you hit that repeat, it's like, oh man, I haven't seen this episode in so long. Well, that's what's fun for me about the rewinds is not like, yes, it's a way for me to put in content when something happens and I don't have a new episode, but it's like, it's almost fun for me because it's like to go back and see how far I've come, but then also, especially if I go back to like, I don't really go back to like 2016 anymore. It's too hard for me. The GarageBand days? Like I don't go back to, definitely not the first 30 episodes for sure. I find I don't go back past episode 100 much anymore because it's just, there's some great stuff in that time period, but it's like, it's really hard for me to listen to because there's some stuff where I'm like, oh my God, what was I thinking? But I don't need to when I have 100 and
200 and
You have 200 episodes
to choose
you don't
from.
mind rerunning.
Yeah.
You know?
Whereas there's other ones I did. So it's like I can still go back.
So not only do you have a large catalog of shows, you have a large catalog of shows you like too.
Yeah. For the most part, I don't think I've had any misses really since at least in the 200s. I don't think I've had any misses.
But would you have gotten to that point without those prior 200 episodes?
Of course not. That's the
That's how
whole
you
point.
figured
Yeah.
it all out.
Yeah, exactly. But I think there's got to be a lot of coalition between that and working on stuff like, say, doing a bunch of work on these random YouTube lists and stuff like that, where you start to kind of figure out what it is you like. And it's exciting to hear that you're getting to doing more character works. I know that's really what you want to do. Do you have any kind of goals as far as with doing that?
I have a couple.
What are the goals?
Being cast in Red Dead Redemption 3.
Okay. Make it happen, Internet.
Or Grand Theft Auto 7, because I think Grand Theft Auto 6 is almost done. So Grand Theft Auto 7 or Red Dead Redemption 3, hit me up, Rockstar. Or Disney movie.
That'd be fun too.
You know, like I think given some more time and refining of my skills and all that, I think I have the potential of people aren't going to like this, but I think I have that Robin Williams-esque dynamic to my voice.
You do.
Where I can do
that. You're not far-fetched to say that.
I think some people might think I am, but you know what? Screw it.
Fuck him.
He's one of my favorite voice actors, and maybe him and Mark Hamill, huge freaking inspirations. Because Mark Hamill's he bends and twists his voice a lot the way I do, and he was one of the first guys I started really when I started wanting to do voiceover work. I'm like, what kind of voice can I almost mimic to kind of show that I have some skill? And I'm like, Mark Hamill's Joker is probably one I can do a good impression of. That is okay, he can do this. Like maybe he can do some of these other kind of character voices as well. So it was kind of, and I know it's like people might say, oh, well, he's just being a copycat and all that. Well, I wanted to kind of prove myself that like, not only can I imitate people, but I can just do limitless things with my voice and different kind of come up with different little, you know, nuances in them and stuff like that, where it becomes original, but it had to get inspiration from somewhere. And that's where the Robin Williams and Mark Hamill stuff comes in, where those are two guys who are really big influences. A little Nolan North too, but he's more of like, he's less of a character guy where he's just got a great voice.
Nolan North is just when Nolan North is playing a character, he's Nolan
North.
Yeah, he's just Nolan North. Yeah,
but a guy like Mark Hamill, sometimes you don't know it's him because he's that good.
Yeah,
and even Robin Williams, sometimes you didn't know it was him. He's that good. He could disguise himself almost, and that's kind of what I go after is kind of that disguising, and I can play like 5 different characters in one show. That's kind of what I go for is that kind of that I've gone that avenue with it.
I think stuff like that speaks to, just to kiss your ass a bit here, I think that speaks to your talent. The fact that you're playing 5 characters in a freaking thing, they're happy with it. And they all, it's not like, what was it? Oh my God, it's a Family Guy skit. Who's the guy who plays Carl? He also plays Bob from Bob's Burgers.
Oh, H. John Benjamin.
It's like, hey, you guys like impressions? You want to hear that guy Bob's from Bob's Burgers? Hey, I'm Bob's from Bob's Burgers.
How about that guy Archer?
That guy, hey, I'm Archer. Like, what if those two met? Oh, hey, Archer. Oh, hey, Bob. How's it going? Like, it's just like...
And you know what? He's one of those guys down that Nolan North. He just has a fantastic voice.
I'm not hating.
His voice is just fantastic.
It just made me think of that.
He's just fantastic. And he's got such that voice has such a personality.
Yeah.
Where I don't have a voice like that. I don't have a voice that stands out amongst everybody else because it's got that one unique characteristic, whether it's the deadpan delivery of a H. John Benjamin or a very dynamic, charismatic voice of a Nolan North. I don't have those tools, but I do have the tools to bend and twist, like I said, bend and twist that voice and make something that its own. Sorry. But yeah.
That's awesome. That's fun. It's fun to hear and dive into this all with you because, like, obviously, like, I know.
And a lot of it's figuring out.
But
it's a lot of it's figuring out what you can already do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not going to get cast for any Morgan Freeman Visa commercials or anything like that, or I'm not going to get any of those James Earl Jones. I don't have that voice, and I think that's a barrier that stops a lot of people because it's like, oh, I don't have the voice. You don't know what you have. You haven't tried it.
I think there's room for pretty much everyone in some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and something that I say a lot that is unpopular, but not everybody is meant to do one specific type of voice.
No.
One thing I say a lot in the creepy pasta narration type world. Sorry, not everybody is meant to be a narrator.
Yeah.
Maybe they can be a character on it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, they could.
Yeah.
There's a place for them. But should you be sitting there narrating a 15, 20-minute long story? Maybe not.
Yeah, like I wouldn't say,
You know?
like myself, I wouldn't put myself as a narrator on something like a creepypasta because I think that should be, somebody with a dark tone and somebody with like almost a brooding sort of mood to them, you know what I mean? And I know that I can't do that. And sometimes it takes some acceptance of that because sometimes you might really, really want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you have to accept maybe you're not at that skill level yet. Maybe you don't have that skill set yet. So you have to do what you're good at, and then kind of you can widen after that.
And know your voice, right?
Know your voice and accept it for what it is. I don't have a deep voice. I don't have a grandiose, 1950s advertising read voice. I just don't have it. I can maybe do a cheesy impression of one, but it's not genuine. It's not authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's sometimes another big thing that people forget when they're trying to get into voiceover is that they're trying to act a certain way.
Yeah.
Where people can hear right through that. People can hear fake from a mile away. So if you're I have a deep voice, I'm going to talk like this on every voiceover I do. Nobody's going to buy that crap. Unless that's what they're aiming for, unless they want like something that sounds fake because it's like some sort of comedic effect or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to book any serious jobs with any serious money being a fake.
Right.
So do what you're good at, figure out what that is, and then capitalize on that. And then you can maybe look into widening your skill set and moving into these different kind of roles as you develop. Because that's the biggest thing. There's so much developing that happens. Like I've been doing it for like on and off for almost 3 years with just strict voice work. Well, I shouldn't say just strict voice work. I was doing the radio stuff too, but I've been focused on mainly my voice work for about 3 years, and I'm still in the infancy of it, I think. It's still very young. It's still very, I'm still very naive as a voice actor. I'm still inexperienced as a voice actor. No matter what people say, I'm very inexperienced. I'm very, I haven't had those big projects that really help you refine your skills and stuff like that. I'm still working towards those and kind of doing other things on my way there. I'm working my way up instead of, just being happy with what I've got. And that's an attitude you have to have. Because if you're not moving up, you're going to stagnate, especially in voiceover work. Because you'll get settling doing the same things over and over and over.
I think you're on the way there at this point.
And there's going to be, there's going to be pit stops along the way. Sometimes you're going to have a rough couple months. Or, it's some months are going to be a little slower than others. And you're not going to find the particular jobs you want in certain times. And that's when that's when you start, that's when you start, I think he doesn't like your bag. That's when you start really figuring out what you can do.
Well, and I think that when you're in the situation you're in, it's just a matter of just doing it and putting the work in. And that's what you're doing now. And it's awesome to see you. I was so fucking happy for you that you took that plunge and proud of you for taking it. Cause I know it's fucking terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been just killing it. And I mean, it's inspiring to see. And I know a lot of people who,
and I would not have had the confidence to do it without guys like you and, like Garrett and Adam, who really support whatever it is I choose to do. Like you guys were the first people I told, and I didn't get one like, holy crap. There wasn't any nervousness from any of you. If anything, I got a lot of, it's about time.
Really? Oh yeah. Do it. Do it, bitch.
you were over the moon. Adam was like, kind of like, oh, it's about time you did. Cause you've been working towards this for a while. And then Garrett was kind of like, he wasn't even surprised. He was kind of like, yeah, that's kind of what it was supposed to happen.
So what do you want for lunch?
And it was kind of, it was like, okay, so nobody's freaking out. Like even my parents didn't freak out. And like, my dad's very, financially focused. Make sure you're financially set. Yeah. He's that's one of the things he thinks about a lot. And even he was like, yeah, well, wasn't that worried. And I'm like, well, I thought you were going to be panicking, you know, like, and I think sometimes I can forget that too. Like people have confidence in me. And I think sometimes I'm the problem sometimes because I lose confidence in myself. And I think that's probably a common thing
for sure.
For people who try voiceover work, because another thing you have to do with voiceover work is you have to be really in tune with your emotions and know how to channel them. Especially when you're doing character work and a character needs to be upset about something. You need to channel something that made you upset so you can kind of go back to that and find that authentic mood, that authentic sound that is you being upset or is you being happy about something. You have to take yourself back there, and that can be taxing on your mental health to, okay, this character's very broken, or this character's very conflicted. Well, now you have to take yourself back to a moment in time where you felt conflicted, you felt bad about something, and you have to channel that mood into your voice so it sounds real to whoever's listening to it. And sometimes you get out of the booth, it's like, man, it's hard, because you have to really, get in touch with that side of yourself. And other times it's the opposite. Sometimes it's, you have a really happy role and you have to kind of channel something that really made you happy and stuff like that and put you in a better mood. But I can definitely see why voice actors have mental health issues sometimes. And maybe that's why they like to stay behind a microphone and like just they're very private people sometimes, because, you go through a lot of different emotions just reading certain scripts sometimes. And I found that out. And it's like Void started out as a very kind of negative character. I think in my head, I thought he was supposed to be a little more villainous than he was. And that was just one of my first impressions of him. So I went to a villainous place in my mind, and like, it's not a fun place to be sometimes.
No, absolutely not.
And then once I realized that he was more bright and he was more kind of charismatic in a way, I was like, okay, so I kind of channeled that, and that kind of just in turn turned it into a more pleasurable experience that way. And now with the other stuff they do, it's very like some of the story-based stuff. I don't know if you've seen it, but like it's a little more emotional. It's a little more raw. Because now they're kind of telling the story of this guy, how he became this detective, right? And I reverted back to a very natural voice for it. But they're doing some deep stuff in those videos, and like they have to be kind of emotional, so I have to kind of take myself back to an emotional time in my life where maybe I was on the verge of tears, or maybe I was on the verge of getting angry about something, and I have to channel that, and those are the harder ones to do.
I had a story I did for my Patreon podcast, and at the end of the story, I wanted to have the character fully break down weeping.
Yeah. And
I was like, I can't fake. I tried faking it, and I was like, can I make myself literally cry?
Yeah. Because if you can't believe it, nobody's going to believe it. You have to convince yourself. That's the hardest. You're the hardest person to convince, especially when it's your own voice. And so if you can convince yourself that what you've just done is real, you're gold. So
what's the best way to do that? Well, make it real. Make it good, baby. Make it good.
Make it good, baby. Make it real, baby.
Make it good. So it definitely gets you can get you in an interesting headspace when you're doing stuff like that. But it's fascinating to hear all this and talk with you about all this. Cause like, obviously we talk about it, but not at length like this.
Yeah.
And I'm curious. I know there's going to be a few people listening to this who are like super envious of your position because they love voiceover and stuff like that. Yeah. So I have to ask, just as we get ready to wind down here, do you have any advice, just basic advice? Because I know obviously you could probably talk for another couple hours about advice for people who want to get into voiceover, but for people who want to get into voiceover, do you have any like quick kind of tips for getting started at it?
Yeah, just use what you got. Like if you got, if you're just rocking recording on a cell phone, okay, you can start doing that. Maybe you won't get a lot of work, or maybe you won't get any work, but you can get some reps in. You can go online and find resources where there's, sample scripts that if you want to do some commercial reads, lots of sample scripts out there you can do. You can just start with whatever you have. You don't need to go out and buy a whole bunch of equipment and all that. One thing you'll always get when people are talking about getting into voiceover is get a coach. which to a degree I agree with. But I think a lot of it's also a lot of that's more of the marketing side of it, I find.
Yeah.
Because
that's the route you went down. Like you got a coach.
I do have a
everything.
coach, and like I think I needed that because I'm very shitty at the business part of it. I'm not a shark that way.
Yeah.
Which there are some voice actors who are very sharks when it comes to their pricing, and I'm not saying that as a bad thing. They know their talent. They know what their talent. They know their talent, and they know what they're worth, and that takes a long time to develop that. So you know, and don't have the expectation that you're going to be rolling in the money right away. It takes a lot of reps to get good at it. A lot. You know, they say like 10,000 hours to become an expert on anything. I think it might be 20 for voiceover. You know, I don't think there is a limit on how you can learn on voiceover because every project's so different. Every client's different. Every voice actor's different. Every job you book, every project you take on is not going to be the same as the last one. Even if it's from the same person, the same topic, it's not the same. There's always going to be something different. So always kind of be prepared that way. And if you want to get into it, just start doing it with whatever you have. Look at what you did with your podcast. You didn't have the resources to make a highly produced podcast. You were doing 10-minute segments at a time and then piecing them together. And that's the biggest thing is like, you have to start somewhere. No matter what you think about it or anything like that, you have to start somewhere and then kind of build on that. So if all you can afford is a $50 microphone and, you know, the laptop you have laying around at the house, that's more than you need at the beginning, right? All you need is a USB cable for the microphone and plug it into the computer and start talking into it. You know, like get Audacity. It's free. You know, you don't need to pay huge money to get into this industry. You need somewhere to start, and you'll need some guidance. You know, you need to have a good mindset, which I think is a struggle for me sometimes. I deal with anxiety all the time, and a lot of that comes in the form of me just not having confidence in myself. So you have to fight that, and there has to be a lot of discipline as well. Because if you want to do this for a living, you know, voice actors don't have bosses. You have bosses as in your clients, but you're the one that has to get up every day, get in the booth, record, edit, and take that time. And you also have to have a good ear for it too. You know, you have to be like, okay, I hear my voice clicking here. I hear, I hear a flaw here, a flaw there. Can't be afraid of re-recording something over and over again until you get exactly what you want. Because if you're not getting what you want, doubt you're getting what the client wants.
Right.
So patience is another big thing that way too. So yeah, my main things probably be, you know, start with whatever you have. Don't be afraid of getting feedback from people. Actually, I would recommend getting as much feedback as you can. Like even if somebody says, "Oh, this is great," and all that, it's like, really, you nothing you want?
Nothing at all. Yeah, it's like, "Oh, this is great." Well, there's nothing. Okay, well maybe this.
Yeah.
If you're looking. I remember,
and that's not
when
even.
I asked someone
sometimes that's not even for the client's good. That's for your own good. It's like I said, to be more objective with what you're doing and what's going to make you money.
Right.
So if somebody's like, "Oh, if you could just read a little more like this, you could take that with you now, and take that on your next job and be like, okay, I can incorporate this part of what I didn't do right the first time that a client called me out on, and now I can already be ahead of the game that way." So yeah, patience. Start with what you have. And it's a process. How about that?
It's a process.
Very much so.
And it's a journey, and you're always going to be learning on it. And,
oh yeah.
You know.
Like with any job, you're still learning about podcasting all these years later. You know, you're still learning how to make your podcast better. You're learning what you do well, what you don't like to do, what you like to do. You know, like I didn't expect you to take on the creepypasta stuff when you first started.
Neither did I.
But you've really gravitated towards it. You really enjoy it. And who knows? Maybe one day you want to cut back on the actual Hotter Show episodes and focus more on one of those ventures because maybe it's more lucrative, or maybe you just enjoy it more. So you kind of can't be afraid to kind of go where where your talent and creativity takes you, especially in voiceover work.
Well, definitely so. And I mean, I think it's fun to sit with you and discuss all this. And I know that some people are going to be very happy to hear firsthand what this journey's been like for you. And I appreciate you.
Hopefully you can
sitting
edit
down
what I've
and-
said into some sort of coherent message.
Oh, absolutely. You're great. You're always great. I can't believe it had been this long because I'm just sitting here like, it's so easy doing this with you. It's just like, oh my God, it's so easy. I just sit here and go, yeah, because it's just great. Like I ask you a question, then you answer it clearly. And it's like, fuck yeah, this is fantastic. I love stuff like this. But for people out there who want to maybe potentially hire you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Email me, Brandon at bowdenvoice.com. Simple as that.
All
There you go.
official and so forth. with
Oh
the
yeah, I got the
website.
official email and everything that way. I was just like, no, I'm not doing one of those Gmail accounts that kind of seem sketchy. No, I'm gonna have the actual email. And so yeah, Brandon at bowdenvoice.com. So that's BOWDEN and BRANDON. Probably should have done that in the reverse order.
Just in case you don't know how to spell Brandon.
Well, see, I always get like, oh, is it an E or an A? I'm like, where?
Where is that with an H? What?
Is that with an A, H, or a Q? I'm like, yes.
Yes, whatever you pick.
Because I get Brendan and like Brendan and like, so it's
Brandon.
like Brandon.
Dawn.
So yeah, is it an E or A? Definitely not an E, but yes, there is an A somewhere in there.
It's an A. You can decide where it is.
Can go at the end, the beginning. I don't know.
Whatever you want, dog. It's up to you.
If I don't answer your email, you might have spelled it wrong. You know, you might get Brendan at bowdenvoice.com. I don't know what that guy's doing, but
He's probably like, "Hey, what's up? This is Brendan." No,
this is Brendan at Bowdenvoice.
that's a parallel world. Anyway, Brandon, thanks a lot, buddy. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, folks, there you have it. My chat with Brandon Bowden from Bowden Voice. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. I cannot believe that it had actually been 2 years since we last heard the sultry voice of Brandon Bowden on The Harder Show. And even longer than that from when we had him on just in a solo capacity. But I can assure you it will not be that long again because it's always a blast getting to chat with Brandon. And if you're in need of some professional voiceover work, be sure to hit him up at Bowden Voice. That's Brandon at bowdenvoice.com. You can also find him on Instagram, of course, as well, under Bowden Voice if you'd like to follow him there. And he'll get you hooked up with some quality voiceover content if you are in need of it, especially some character work. I would personally love to see him play can someone make like a cartoon where there's like a talking radish or something? I don't know. I just picture Brandon being the voice of a radish. I don't know why it just popped into my head. Just like I hope popping into your head. That was the dumbest transition I've ever had. Popping into your head is the want and the need to subscribe to this podcast. Be sure to do so. However you are listening, leave a like, comment, let me know what you thought of the episode. I always appreciate the feedback. You can also follow The Harder Show on social media. We have Instagram and Facebook. You can, of course, contact me anytime if you would like to be on the show or have a question about something, or you'd like to get in contact with me for some reason about the show on social media or thehardershow@gmail.com. Of course, before we go, I got to take a second to give a quick shout out to my Patreon supporters, my hotheads. We, of course, have the OG hothead, Scott Duquette. Scott, thanks so much for all the support, brother. You know how much I appreciate you. We also have Ronan Komori of Baseline Feed. Thank you for all the support, Ronan. We, of course, have Wolf Delta Pi, also known as Tanner Wood of Baseline Feed. Tanner, thanks for all the support, brother. I appreciate you so very much. We have the very talented Mr. Eric Phones. Eric, I love you, buddy. Thanks for everything. We have Mr. Arthur Unk, writer extraordinaire. Arthur, I appreciate you, my man. Thank you so very much. We have Mike Quintero of Mike's Mystery Mansion. Mike, thanks for all the support, brother. Then we have, of course, the very talented CM Peters from Baseline Feed. Thank you very much for all the support, CM. We have Jason Reese from Jaybridge Digital Arts. Thank you very much, brother. We have Kelly Sisson. Thank you so much for all the support, Kelly. I appreciate it. Terry and Janet Hodder. It's weird. Same last name. We have Mr. Brandon Bowden of Bowden Voice, my guest today. Thank you very much for all the support, brother. And we have Neil Skarupa. Neil, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you so very much for all the support. If you would like a little shout out like that at the end of every episode of The Harder Show, or you would like access to my very popular among my patrons horror narration podcast, Taped of Trepidation, be sure to check out the Hodder Show Patreon, patreon.com/The Hodder Show. Joining at the $5 or above tier will get you access to the Taped of Trepidation, but even at the $1 level, you'll get access to cool behind-the-scenes stuff, an exclusive channel on Discord, as well as a shout-out on every episode of The Hodder Show. And thank you so very much again to all my patrons for all of the support. And with that, we're going to sign off here today. Thank you so very much for listening. I appreciate you very, very much. And I'll catch you next time on The Hodder Show. Take it easy, guys.